Chapter 456, Supreme 3. Jin Yiren was genuinely amazed. Mok Jiongun's sword just now possessed truly immeasurable supreme power. She had thought that the invisible sword called the Sword Extreme was the pinnacle of swordsmanship. But to think there was something beyond even that. He's truly a genius. She had to acknowledge Mok Jiongun's martial talent. Although she had been told she inherited tremendous talent from her father, it was nothing compared to Mok Jiongun's martial genius. Was there any point in comparing herself, who hadn't yet mastered the martial arts inherited from her ancestors, to Mok Jiongun, who constantly surpassed his own limits to reach new realms? It's shameful. She had only thought about reviving her family and revenge, but faced with Mok Jiongun's endless progress, she felt ashamed of her own attitude towards martial arts for the first time. Perhaps it was even more so because someone who had once been far inferior to her had now reached a place she couldn't touch. On the other hand, still not enough. Mok Jiongun wasn't satisfied with this. He had succeeded in raising supreme power in his sword, but he felt something was still lacking. Though he didn't know what it was, he still had to keep filling it. And, sure, heat haze rose from his entire body. The supreme sword caused even more physical strain than the sword that exerted power into a single point. Moreover, it required strong will, so the mental consumption was also tremendous. At the moment he manifested the desired form of the sword, his body was so drained that it reached a state of exhaustion, so it wasn't yet at a level where he could use it freely. The corner of Mok Jiongun's mouth rose. It's endless. Is this the charm of martial arts? Even when he had reached the life and death realm and completed the invisible sword, the Sword Extreme, he had thought that was the end of swordsmanship, but it wasn't at all. This proved it. There is no end to martial arts. Shururu. At that moment, blood vessels writhed at Mok Gon's severed neck, trying to regenerate. Seeing this, a gleam appeared in Mok Jiongun's eyes. If it was trying to recover even with the entire body blown away, this wasn't just ordinary regeneration, but close to immortality, wasn't it? Looking at this, Mok Jiongun thought. Come to think of it, among the enemies he had faced so far, there were those with such excellent regenerative abilities. The annoying thing about such people was that they tended to act differently from normal people because they believed in their regenerative abilities. And unlike ordinary enemies, regeneration changed the nature of the battle itself. Variables could occur at any time. Is it impossible to exert supreme power that even surpasses regeneration? But power is literally just power. Regenerative ability was literally just an ability, not the object itself. This concept wasn't something that could be dealt with by power alone. However, while ordinary people would have stopped here, Mok Jiongun's thoughts were reaching higher. Is there no way to make the sword force, sword energy sharper to the point where even regeneration is impossible? Mok Jiongun's thoughts didn't last long. The reason was that Mok Gon's body was really trying to regenerate. Shururu. Blood vessels were connecting, bones were growing, and muscles were forming. Mok Jiongun clicked his tongue at the marvelous regenerative ability. But fortunately, he knew what this person's weakness was because he had fought him once before. Twack. As Mok Jiongun drew his sword hilt, the regenerating part was cut off. Kiok. After cutting this, Mok Jiongun reached for the eye on his forehead. As he did so, Mok Gon opened his mouth. Really? Have you truly lost your core and become human? At those words, Mok Jiongun's hand, which was reaching for the eyeball, paused for a moment. Staring intently at the eyeball on the forehead, Mok Jiongun said, "Did you hear that from Ghost Blade?" Mok Gon didn't deny it. The first thing he did when he came to the bamboo forest was to subdue Ghost Blade. Having confirmed that another kindred who had worked with him for a long time had perished, he realized that the bastard was no longer his limb. That's why he tried to dig out what the guy had found out. But the guy's lips were tight. Rather, he tried to confuse him. The incarnate can no longer be your enemy. Can't be my enemy. Having lost the core, he chose the path of regression himself. Regression. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. He is no longer the incarnate that threatens you, but now just an ordinary human. So no more. Quack. Kiok. I don't know why I can't feel the core, but you're still hiding something. Do you think a mere ordinary human could stand against me? You'll have to tell me everything you're hiding. I have nothing to say to the likes of you. What? Get away from him. Mok Gon was inwardly surprised at Ghostblade's words. It was surprising enough that his will hadn't perished even after more than 100 years had passed, let alone that he had even eliminated his kindred in the end, but to think his loyalty towards his master was still alive? How could a mere human possess such strong will? Feeling both wonder and interest here, Mok Gon tried to completely delve into his mind, but at that moment Jin Yiren came out of the formation technique, leading to the current situation. Mok Gon glared at Mok Jiangun and opened his mouth. Why did you become human? Mok Jiangun gave no answer to Mok Gon's question. He too had learned the truth through Ghostblade, and even now this fact was still hard to accept. Therefore Mok Jiangun discarded complicated thoughts. Whatever his past might have been, he decided to focus on himself now. Cook. At that moment Mok Gon suddenly burst into laughter. It was an utterly bitter, maniacal laughter. After laughing for a while, his eyes were filled with madness. He seemed like a different person. To become human. Cook. I really hate it. I really hate you. Oh, I loathe you. To think that a being expelled from the clan would become human, even regressing voluntarily. I can see your despicable intentions. Intentions? Say what you want. You can't gain anything. If I can't obtain it, neither can you. Nonsense. I'll give you true despair. I'll show you pain beyond what I've experienced. Mok Jiangun, seemingly deciding there was no need to listen further to Mok Gon's words that sounded like curses, reached for the eye on his forehead. It was to make contact with the eyeball and find out where his main body was. Puk. Since the bastard might self-destruct again, this time he quickly plucked out the eyeball to prevent him from controlling energy. Chwa. He cut off all the visible capillaries in the eyeball. Looking at how energy flowed through each of those capillaries, they seemed to play a role similar to meridians or energy circulation paths. So Mok Jiangun held the eye and closed his eyes. Since one of the avatars had died, he should be able to narrow down the dispersed candidates. But at that moment, in Mok Jiangun's mind, there was a dark hall with a stone throne shrouded in shadows, and a being sitting on that throne was visible. Though the face wasn't visible due to the deep shadows, the third eye on the forehead was clear due to its unique radiance. Could this be the main body? The mental focus wasn't dispersed to where the avatars were, but immediately pinpointed this location. As he was wondering, Mok Gon sitting on the stone throne opened his mouth. The time has come. What? It's not that you found me, but that I revealed myself. What's his intention? Even when they clashed at the Heaven and Earth Society, he had talked about avatars and made the tracking disperse to the locations of other avatars to prevent his own location from being detected. But this time he didn't try to self-destruct the avatar's eye and willingly showed his location. Here Mok Jiangun couldn't help but be suspicious. Then Mok Gon on the stone throne said, I'll give you one last chance. If you willingly offer your soul and spirit souls, I'll mercifully grant you a peaceful death. Mok Jiangun snorted at this proposal. Then he sent his intention. Your thoughts differ from mine. Our thoughts differ? I'm going to torment you thoroughly until you beg to die. Quaduk. No sooner had those words ended than the armrest of the stone throne crumbled, and the gleam of the third eye visible between the shadows was tinged with killing intent. The entire hall gradually shook with tremendous power. Mok Gon spoke threateningly in a seething voice. You're passing up the opportunity to the very end. To him Mok Jiangun smirked and replied in an arrogant voice. The right to give opportunities belongs to the strong. This doesn't apply to you. Kwang. As those words ended, the stone throne shattered to pieces and Mok Gon rose from his seat. Suruk. Regardless, Mok Jiangun paid no heed to this and stopped the mental tracking. He had roughly figured out where the bastard was, so further conversation was meaningless. As the mental image was breaking off, he heard the bastard's mad cry, but it was none of his concern. Kwajik. Mok Jiangun also burst the eye of Mok Gon's avatar he was holding in his hand. As the eye burst, the ominous energy flowing from it was also cut off. Then Chang Ryong asked in an expectant voice. Did you find him? Yes. Where? Where's he? If I tell you, are you going to go alone again? Chang Ryong was momentarily at a loss for words at Mok Jiangun's sound transmission. At this, Mok Jiangun shrugged and said in a disappointed tone. I didn't think it would be true, but it seems it is. If that's the case, I don't think I can tell you. We promised to go together. No promise is needed. What? Even without that, I'll go with you. Whether it's the end or whatever, I'll be with you till the very end. Is that enough now? Mok Jae-eun gave no answer to Chong Ryong's words. Then, sensing Jin Yurin approaching, he turned his head with an expressionless face as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Jin Yurin tilted her head slightly. She was sure he had been smiling just now. Chapter 457 E Supreme 4. In the inner formation, the green meadow had long since disappeared. The place was nothing but ruins. Ha! Ha! Wicked Granny Cheol Su Ryan exhaled roughly, glaring at the two avatars of Mok Gon opposing her. Those damnable things, each having consumed either the blood or essence of a spirit beast, had cultivation levels equal to or greater than her own. If she were facing just one, she might have had a chance, but dealing with two opponents of similar strength was overwhelming. Cough. Cough. Her internal injuries must be severe as blood came up with each cough. Cheol Su Ryan looked at the black blood on her palm with a bitter smile. Is this karma too? She never thought the evil deeds she had committed would easily disappear just because she practiced cultivation. But now her only desire was to shed all her burdens and go to his side, yet this happened when she was so close to the end. Maybe it's punishment. Perhaps she never had the right from the beginning. Maybe fate was punishing her because she didn't deserve to go to that place said to be like a paradise just like him and them. Still, there was one thing she felt she had done right. She had saved his only remaining bloodline in the mortal world. At least it was a comfort that she had done something for him before departing. Growling, Cheol Su Ryan gathered the remaining true chi in both hands to create a faint formless claw. After all, she had once been called a great villain, so she intended to take them both down with her, even if it meant mutual destruction. But then the avatars of Mok Gon spoke. Give up. You can't defeat us. I don't know what you did, but open the door to exit the formation. This is the last verbal warning. Cheol Su Ryan snorted at their words and replied. You want to get out of here? It's the only way to save your life. Oh really? But what can I do? This space he created for me is a bit of a shame, but it seems this should become your grave. You're making a decision you'll regret. It doesn't matter. Let's start by cutting off your limbs. With that, the two avatars of Mok Gon also raised their invisible swords and approached. It seems they didn't have high hopes from the beginning either. Meanwhile, one wall completely collapsed and the pillar supporting the formation was destroyed. The painting of the peach blossom spring hanging on the crumbling thatched wall began to shake violently. Bang! Bang! As the three supreme experts clashed, the surroundings were once again engulfed in the aftermath. Tremendous wind pressure and sword energy slashed in all directions, erasing even the last traces of the meadow. However, this didn't seem like it would last long. Unlike them, whose true chi was overflowing as if they had consumed spirit essence, Cheol Su Ryan was almost at her limit. The reason she was barely holding on was that she was consuming her spirit origin true chi. Knowing this, they pushed even harder. Cheol Su Ryan's expression darkened as she was pushed back. She had intended to take them down with her, but the coordinated attacks of these avatars who shared thoughts were too meticulous to find an opening. As she was pushed back relentlessly, numerous sword wounds appeared on her body. Twatch. Ah. It seems she won't be able to take them both down after all. If that's the case, there's no choice. A strong killing intent flashed in her eyes. It would be difficult, but if she sacrificed her flesh to take the bones, she could at least take one of them down. Flinch. Noticing her tremendous killing intent, they exchanged glances and immediately moved to cut off both her arms before she could do anything. Grind. Cheol Su Ryan gritted her teeth. Enduring the pain of her arms being cut off, she bit the neck of the left avatar, intending to tear off its head. Just as their invisible swords were about to rush towards her arms. At that very moment, suddenly, with a bloody radiance, a burst of blood demon chi exploded, severing the arm of one of the avatars wielding an invisible sword. What is this? But that wasn't the end. The being that cut off the avatar's arm grabbed the back of its head, smashed its face into the ground and dragged it forward, grinding its face. Quang. Who? As the other avatar was startled and tried to respond. Shua. What? A whirlwind of frost engulfed the avatar's entire body, and an immense cold chi arose, causing the arm holding the invisible sword to freeze at an incredible speed. Feeling the sensation in its arm disappear in an instant, Mok Gon's avatar hurriedly cut off its freezing arm like a lizard shedding its tail. Pat. And as it spread its body, "Where do you think you're going?" Tiver. It suddenly felt someone behind it. Cold sweat dripped down the forehead of Mok Gon's avatar as it sensed the tremendous cold chi and power from behind. What the hell is this? When did such monstrous beings appear? While caught in confusion, Cheol Su Ryan looked at those who had instantly reversed the situation with reddened eyes. A peerlessly beautiful woman with blood-red hair fluttering, exuding an arrogant and sharp aura, shook off the brain matter that had been ground into paste from her hand and spoke. "Even the great wicked granny is finished. Getting caught up by such lowlifes when told not to kill." Agreeing with her mocking words, a woman with silver hair and a mysterious aura responded with a radiant smile. "I know, right? This is why she can't compete with us and sister for the top spot in the rankings." Gyo. As she lightly waved one hand, a blizzard was about to sweep through the surroundings. While their appearance was welcome, what brought tears to her eyes was the being who appeared next, backlit by dazzling sunlight. From the moment he appeared, strange things began to happen. Peruru. The swords held by Mok Gon's avatars began to tremble and move on their own, without any flow of true chi. The reason Jin Yuren called for Mok Jaeongun was none other than because of Ghost Blade. After Mok Jaeongun defeated Mok Gon's avatar and the situation calmed down, she had checked on him out of concern as he was the most severely injured. As feared, Ghost Blade's condition was truly the worst. His right arm was severed, his abdomen and shoulder were pierced through with severe bleeding, and of course his internal injuries were also severe, with his internal organs filled with blood. It was remarkable that he was even alive. Ghost Blade, who could have died at any moment, didn't try to circulate his chi to increase his chances of survival, but instead sought out Mok Jaeongun. It seemed he wanted to say something with his last bit of strength rather than hope for survival. As they were approaching him with Mok Jaeongun, it happened. "Stop." At Mok Jaeongun's words, Jin Yuren instinctively halted her steps and then, papapapapak. Stone swords, sharpened like thorns, shot up from the ground where they were about to walk. If they had taken one more step, the swords would have pierced right through their feet. Realizing there was an enemy who could completely conceal their energy, Jin Yuren hurriedly sent sword energy towards the ground with a sword technique. Twatch. The sword energy she sent burrowed into the ground, but there was no response. However, bang! As Mok Jaeongun stomped on the ground with true step. Kwaridak. Kung. The stone swords blocking their path shattered, and the sound of something bursting from the ground echoed. Then something erupted from the ground. That something was none other than Ku. It was Destruction Emperor, one of the first-tier members of Secret Society, spitting out black blood. Though he had been severely injured and seemingly dead inside the formation, he had not missed the moment when Mok Gon's avatars broke through the formation and escaped outside. After getting out, Destruction Emperor had been recovering his demonic power and energy underground. Then when Mok Gon's avatar was defeated, he attempted to attack from underground to somehow interfere with Mok Jaeongun. However, Mok Jaeongun's power had already increased beyond what it was before. Unable to withstand the vibrations that shook the entire underground with a single true step, Destruction Emperor ultimately had to surface. Though in agony and coughing blood, Destruction Emperor, who had sprung up from behind Ghost Blade, grabbed his neck and shouted, "Quack! Don't move. If you come closer, I'll twist his neck. Which do you think will be faster? That or my sword?" Huh. Such overconfidence. In that instant, a sword mark appeared on the Destruction Emperor's forehead, and blood and brain matter burst from the back of his head. Destruction Emperor staggered and was about to fall backward. Seeing this, Jin Yuren couldn't help but stick out her tongue in amazement. When did he do that? Even though she was right beside him, she hadn't seen Mok Jaeongun's sword. It was truly the essence of swift swordsmanship. It seemed he had now entered a realm that she could no longer even hope to glimpse. A speed so fast that even the act of swinging the sword couldn't be perceived. Indeed, unless it was a monster like Imi Manjiang, could anyone in the current martial arts world face Mok Jaeongun? At that moment, Mok Jaeongun's form suddenly appeared behind Destruction Emperor, whose head had been pierced and was falling. He should already be dead, so why did he move his body so quickly? As she wondered this, Mok Jaeongun, Kwajik, stomped on Destruction Emperor's face, crushing it completely. Jin Yiren frowned and said, "He's dead. Why are you doing that?" "He's not dead." "What?" She was about to ask what he meant when a strange sight caught her eye. Destruction Emperor's body was trying to move even though his face had been caved in and crushed, and the crushed flesh was rising up, regenerating at an incredible speed. Seeing this, she realized. Could it be? Had he consumed the blood or essence of a spirit beast? As she thought this, Mok Jaeongun grabbed Destruction Emperor's head rather than his face, which was trying to regenerate. And then, he unleashed the ritual of binding. Ku. Destruction Emperor's body convulsed violently. Those who have consumed the essence or blood of spirit beasts overflow with natural earth energy, giving them vitality incomparable to ordinary people. Therefore, the only way was to make them exhaust this vitality. One method for this was absorption. Although energy was now meaningless to him since he had learned to handle Supreme Sword, Mok Jaeongun sucked in the demonic power and natural earth energy inside the creature. The demonic power could be used to help Chong Ryong recover. But as he absorbed the natural earth energy inside the creature, unlike with Kong Yom, this time he felt the energy of the earth, that is, earth chi. Along with this, he saw a being in his mind's eye. Surprisingly, it was a massive white serpent with dazzlingly white scales. Chapter 458, Supreme 5. This is. In his mind's eye, he saw a massive white serpent with smooth, snow-white scales. It bore a resemblance to the dragons of legend and fantasy. Its appearance was so majestic that it nearly took his breath away. However, if there was one difference between this serpent and a dragon, it was that its horns were shorter than expected. Compared to its enormous body, the horns seemed to be just barely growing. As he was pondering this, he saw a figure wearing a bamboo hat approaching the white serpent. This person was holding a sword that seemed to have been burned black, and the moment the serpent saw the sword, it roared as if having a seizure. The tremendous roar created shockwaves that sent the bamboo-hatted figure flying backward. However, the figure quickly regained their footing and once again launched towards the serpent, initiating a battle between them. Every time the serpent moved its body, it caused earthquakes and landslides as if it were a natural disaster. Kwang. The fight between the serpent and the bamboo-hatted figure was devastating the surroundings. However, their battle didn't last very long. This was because the blackened sword held by the bamboo-hatted figure managed to cut through the serpent's scales. As the large scales were cut away and the sword pierced its body, the serpent writhed in agony. Not missing this moment, the bamboo-hatted figure leapt onto the serpent's head where its horns were and drove down a chi strike that created massive shockwaves. Pong! Hit by the chi strike, the serpent staggered and fell. Pong! His body was so long and massive that when it fell, the surrounding area shook. After the serpent collapsed, the bamboo-hatted figure climbed down from its head and began examining the area below its chest, touching it gently. As they did so, someone approached. It was Destruction Emperor, one of the first-tier members of Secret Society. As Destruction Emperor approached, the bamboo-hatted figure shook their head and spoke with a tone of disappointment. "I had my doubts, but the spirit origin hasn't properly formed yet. Even though it's this large." To this question, the bamboo-hatted figure held up the blackened sword and said, "It's the leader and considered the most auspicious of the 5 spirit beasts. When this serpent fully matures, it will become a dragon and then transcend the natural order." Natural order? What do you mean? For humans, you can think of it as similar to the concept of ascending to immortality. Ascending to immortality. Destruction Emperor couldn't hide his surprise at these words. Then looking puzzled, he asked, "So, does that mean that before this serpent was born, the original serpent had already become a dragon and ascended?" "Could have. But it didn't." "What do you mean it didn't? Do you know what happens when a spirit beast becomes corrupted?" "What happens?" "Unlike the Imi Manjiang born from Yin energy, spirit beasts are born from the condensation of natural earth energy, so they can be considered the essence of immortality itself. However, if they become corrupted, they lean towards the opposite nature, that of demons or evil." "So you're saying the predecessor of this serpent became corrupted?" To this question, the bamboo-hatted figure chuckled and replied, "That's right. It became thoroughly corrupted. It even tried to exterminate the human race." Huh. Even if the human-demon war isn't recorded in official histories, it's not such ancient past for you lot. But you, being born into the imperial family, seem to know nothing about it. How could I? When I was young, that damned imperial father of mine erased all records related to the martial arts world. But come to think of it, that sword. Didn't you say it was made from dragon scales? Don't tell me that dragon was... Yes. It's from the scales of the dead dragon. At these words from the bamboo-hatted figure, a flash of greed appeared in Destruction Emperor's eyes as he looked at the sword. Noticing this, the bamboo-hatted figure put the sword into a special scabbard and said, "Don't even think about it. If it's not compatible, you'll only be possessed by its demonic nature." At these words, Destruction Emperor clicked his tongue in disappointment. Then, approaching the fallen serpent and touching its horns, Destruction Emperor asked, "So what are you going to do? Didn't you promise to give me the serpent's spirit origin? If it's still a young serpent, we'll have to make do with this. Well, even this much should be more than enough for your pursuit of immortality." As soon as those words were spoken, the bamboo-hatted figure thrust their arm into the serpent's chest. As they were about to extract the spirit origin from inside. At that moment, the serpent's eyes snapped open and it let out a roar. With that, Destruction Emperor and the bamboo-hatted figure who were nearby were sent flying backward. As they were thrown back, the roaring serpent burrowed into the ground and disappeared. Destruction Emperor, who had hit the wall, ran towards the hole the serpent had dug as soon as he regained his senses. Damn it! How could it have awakened in such a short moment? As he stood there in shock, the bamboo-hatted figure called out to him. "It's fine." "What do you mean it's fine? Do you know how many people we mobilized just to find that one serpent? This is enough." "What do you mean this is Inu?" "Ah." Destruction Emperor's eyes widened as he turned his head. It was because he saw what appeared to be a fragment of the spirit origin in the bamboo-hatted figure's hand. The bamboo-hatted figure pointed to a large piece of the serpent's scale that had fallen to the ground and said, "We got what we needed. But letting it escape. Too much of a good thing, human. If you really need it, aim for when the serpent has fully matured. After all, spirit beasts don't stray far from where they were born." At this advice from the bamboo-hatted figure, Destruction Emperor looked at the hole in the ground with regret. As their figures gradually blurred, Mok Jiongun emerged from his vision. The vision had lasted only a moment, and when he came back to his senses he could see Destruction Emperor, who had become emaciated like a skeleton. Destruction Emperor tried to say something as he was dying, but eventually his head dropped. Mok Jiongun stomped on Destruction Emperor's head once more. Quajik. There was no response from the crushed head. Due to the ritual of binding absorbing all the energy of the serpent's spirit origin, his body could no longer regenerate. After confirming that he was completely dead, Mok Jiongun hurriedly approached Ghost Blade. He checked his pulse. Jin Yurin, who had approached after Destruction Emperor died, asked, "Is he all right?" Mok Jiongun shook his head in response. If there had been even a little vital energy left, Mok Jiongun would have tried to infuse some of the absorbed spirit origin energy or use magic to heal his wounds. However, all of this was only possible if there was at least a little vital energy remaining. He had already exhausted all his energy fighting Mok Gon's avatar and was now in a state just before drawing his last breath. It didn't matter if he died. But there were still things Mok Jiongun needed to hear, so he tried to infuse some of the absorbed spirit origin energy to extend his life a little, even though it was like pouring water into a broken pot. Then, don't waste your effort. Accept the energy. There's still more I need to hear. Chunchu. Cough cough. Ghost Blade, gasping for breath, desperately searched for his daughter. Aware that his life was ending soon, he seemed to want to see his flesh and blood one last time. The old Mok Jiongun wouldn't have cared at all about this. However, having deepened his connection with Chong Ryong and come to understand emotion, he asked Jin Yurin, "Can you bring someone named Chunchu from outside the bamboo grove?" "Chunchu. It's his daughter." All right." Jin Yurin nodded and immediately flew towards the outside of the bamboo grove. For now, there weren't many people's energies felt outside the bamboo grove anymore. Although there had been concerns since Mok Gon's avatar had directly descended, it seemed that the subordinates outside hadn't been touched. Perhaps worried about the forbidden technique falling into his hands, they had entered the bamboo grove directly. Meanwhile, Ghost Blade waved his hand with unfocused eyes. He's already at his limit. As Chang Ryong said, judging by the faded color of his eyes, it seemed he would soon breathe his last. Feeling urgent, Mok Jaeon was about to ask something, but Ghost Blade spoke first. I won't ask you to save, young master. By Yong Hien, what are you talking about? More importantly, grandfather. Mok Jaeon tried to hear what he wanted from him, but Ghost Blade continued what he was saying, ignoring that. He, with his remaining self, left the truth of the past to the current society leader. Society leader did his best to correct everything that was twisted. I'm not interested in that. Ghost Blade tightly grasped Mok Jaeon's hand, and with tears of blood he spoke with difficulty. They were only deceived by his schemes. Please, free them from him. Even though he could barely breathe, Ghost Blade was using all his strength to convey his wishes. Sensing that his end was near, Mok Jaeon infused spirit origin energy into Ghost Blade's hand and said, "The secret of moon vein that can persuade incarnate. Just tell me what that means. Cut out all the unnecessary talk and hurry." Chew. As he infused the energy, it was leaking out. It was like pouring water into a broken pot. Mok Jaeon tightly grasped Ghost Blade's weakening hand and urged, "Ghost Blade. Ryu. Soul, you're fated." His voice trailed off with a wheezing sound. Realizing this wouldn't work, Mok Jaeon began forming hand seals to perform a spell. Reverse 8 Divine Generals technique. It was a type of magic that uses the 8 human talismans to control spirits. He was intentionally trying to turn him into a vengeful spirit before his soul completely scattered to heaven and earth. It was at that moment. Nu. Someone came running with a heart-wrenching cry. It was Chun Chu, one of the first-tier members of Secret Society. Her body covered in blood, she ran over and pushed aside Mok Jaeon, who was forming the hand seals for the Reverse 8 Divine Generals technique, and embraced Ghost Blade. Chun Chu, with tears streaming down her face, cried out, "No. Please. Sick." Ghost Blade placed his hand on Chun Chu's back. Her tear-filled eyes trembled. "Please." For a full 100 years, not once had she properly called him, so how could he leave like this? Chun Chu tightly embraced Ghost Blade and said with a choked voice, As her voice rang in his ears, a faint smile appeared on Ghost Blade's face, which had been growing cold and stiff. And with that he rested his head on Chun Chu's shoulder. Chun Chu held back her breath and sobbed in that position. Watching them, Mok Jaeon, who had been gathering magical power, lowered his hands that were forming the seals. Why did you stop? To Chang Ryong's question, Mok Jaeon replied with a soft exhale. Because he can't become a vengeful spirit now. Chapter 459, Approaching Omens, 1. The Reverse 8 Divine Generals technique. It's a type of magic that uses the 8 human talismans to control spirits. If used well, this technique can artificially create a vengeful spirit through sorcery before the soul completely scatters to heaven and earth. However, there's a major prerequisite for this to work. It requires instilling a strong grudge before death. There was a good chance it could have worked. Ghost Blade had the conditions to become a vengeful spirit due to his strong loyalty and anger towards Mok Gon, but at the last moment his daughter Chun Chu's words instantly dissolved all of that. This was evident from his peaceful expression as he breathed his last. Why did you stop? To Chang Ryong's question, Mok Jaeon replied with a soft exhale. Because he can't become a vengeful spirit now. You've changed a lot, mortal. Chang Ryong felt strange at Mok Jaeon's answer. He used to be someone who couldn't feel any emotion other than anger, even more so than herself, a vengeful spirit. But now he was somewhat responsive to others' emotions. The old him would have cut Chun Chu's throat to draw out Ghost Blade's anger for his own purposes. However, now he let him go. The emotionless one was gradually becoming more human. However, the secret of moon vein that can persuade incarnate. Just tell me what that means. Cut out all the unnecessary talk and hurry. Ryu, Soul, you're fated. What on earth did this mean? Those last words left by Ghost Blade kept swirling in her mind. Having been with Mok Jae-eun for a long time, she had shared most of his experiences. Because of this, unlike her feelings for Mok Jae-eun, her doubts about his origins were growing. The unknown being inside him as well as the incarnate mentioned in Fire Faith Order's prophecy. And, have you really lost your core and become human? Did you hear that from Ghost Blade? Becoming human. I really hate it. I really hate you. Oh, I loathe you. A being expelled from its clan, degrading itself to become human. I can see your detestable intentions. What did Mok Gon mean by those words? He spoke as if Mok Jae-eun had been a non-human entity that became human. Her thoughts were becoming increasingly complex. At first she thought it was just a coincidence. But at some point she realized that Mok Jae-eun's path and her own were becoming increasingly intertwined. What was going on? Although she kept denying it, saying it couldn't possibly be true, someone kept coming to mind. She was aware that he too was no ordinary being. But due to death she had become a vengeful spirit without knowing anything about him. Ryu, Soul, you're fated. Could it be that what Ghost Blade tried to say at the end was, just then, young Master Mok? Jin Yurin called out to Mok Jae-eun, who had been staring at the dead Ghost Blade and the sobbing Chunchu holding him in a small voice. As he turned his head, he saw that her face was flushed red. Judging by her moist eyes, it seemed she had shed tears watching this father and daughter. She too, having lost her father, felt sympathy for their shared pain. Ahem. In the end, did you hear nothing from him? Jin Yurin asked in a whisper, clearing her throat as if choked up. Mok Jae-eun shook his head at her question. He hadn't been able to hear the few things he really wanted to ask about. At Mok Jae-eun's response, Jin Yurin spoke in a troubled voice. The outcome isn't good. Even though we prevented the forbidden technique from falling into their hands by defeating Mok Gon's avatar, we still don't know where his main body is. What did you just say? Pardon? Before mentioning his main body. I said we prevented the forbidden technique from falling into their hands. At her words, Mok Jae-eun furrowed his brow and then asked. Did the wicked granny have the forbidden technique memorized in addition to the secret book she gave me? That's right. Because she had been captured by them, the wicked granny revealed the forbidden technique to save her from them. And she ultimately sacrificed herself for her. Seeming to be overcome with emotion again, Jin Yurin spoke with reddened eyes. But one avatar here was killed by you and the other two avatars were trapped when Cheol Surayan destroyed the formation, so ultimately Mok Gon's main body. No. They share consciousness. What? Tik-tuk. Mok Jae-eun tapped his head with his finger as he replied. They share memories with the avatars. As a result, the forbidden technique has fallen into the hands of Mok Gon's main body. Mok Jae-eun clicked his tongue as he said this. But it was hard to blame anyone for this. If he hadn't been dragged into the bamboo scroll of the 8 trigrams, he might not have reached the level of Extreme Sword and the Supreme Sword until now, which could have been dangerous. In the end it was a case of gaining one thing and losing another. The only fortunate thing was that all the enemy had obtained was the spell formula of the forbidden technique. Thankfully Chong Ryong and Wai So-yun are on our side. If even one of them had been in the enemy's hands, it would have been troublesome. But since he had also retrieved Wai So-yun who held Chong Ryong's soul, there shouldn't be any problems with the forbidden technique. Unaware of this, Jin Yurin spoke in bewilderment. Then we have no time to waste. No, but still. Didn't you see what I sent through Dam Bekha? Dam Bekha. Ah, I see you didn't. If the forbidden technique has fallen into the hands of Mok Gon, the leader of secret society, they will bring about a day of catastrophe incomparable to last time. At her words, Mok Jae-eun asked with curiosity. What does the forbidden technique have to do with the catastrophe? The reason Mok Gon wanted to obtain the forbidden technique was because of Bai Yong-hyun of Heaven Vein, the will of the body he occupied. Wasn't he forcibly holding on to Chong Ryong's soul, preventing her from properly reincarnating, out of an endless madness to have her in his possession? As if to answer his doubts, Jin Yurin drew a picture on the ground with sharp energy. Suk. What she drew was a map of the entire Central Plains. Wondering why she was drawing this, he saw her mark 5 spots around the edges of the Central Plains map. 1 in the north, 1 each in the northeast and northwest, and 1 each in the southeast and southwest. Finally, she inscribed what looked like a spell formula between these points. The moment he saw it, Mok Jaeungun's eyes lit up with recognition. This is. He had seen this spell formula before, though he wasn't sure exactly where. During the second test at the Corpse Blood Valley of the Heaven and Earth Society, he had faced a berserk Imi beast called Galgio while trying to capture a flag. Afterwards he had also discovered a spell to make Imi go berserk in the magic books and research notes possessed by another Three Eyes, Zhou Taichong, and it was almost identical to this. However, there was one problem with this spell. It excessively increased the Yin energy in the atmosphere to amplify their killing nature, resulting in an unimaginably large consumption of magical power. And once all the magical power was exhausted, the berserk state would end. To perform a spell on such an enormous scale would require an unimaginable amount of magical power. Is it realistically possible to secure enough magical power to perform this? The scale of the spell was far too large. A spell that could cover the entire Central Plains was beyond imagination. At this scale, it might only be possible if numerous magical tools imbued with magical power and thousands, no tens of thousands of diviners exhausted all their magical power and vital energy. As he thought this, he noticed Jin Yuren making special markings at a few places between the completed spell formation. One was not far from the Sichuan clan, and another was pointing exactly at the Heaven and Earth Society. What could these be indicating? Mok Jaeungun asked. What are those? I'm not sure. It was written that the forbidden technique is needed at these 4 points. The forbidden technique is needed here? The Heaven and Earth Society was where Wei Soyun was, so that made sense. But he had no idea what the other 3 places were. There was no apparent pattern and they were scattered in different locations. Is that all? Come to think of it, below the places where it said the forbidden technique was needed, it was written 6 demons. At these words, one of Mok Jaeungun's eyebrows shot up. Chong Ryong spoke to him in a meaningful voice. Mortal, don't you remember what happened at the Heaven and Earth Society? The Assassin King of the Sea, one of the 6 demons, is there. Among the monsters known as Imi there exists a hierarchy. This hierarchy is divided into ferocious beasts, strange beasts, wicked beasts, demonic beasts and spirit beasts. Among these, the highest rank is called Spirit Beast, and among them, there are 6 spirit beasts that are infinitely close to being divine beasts. The Imi refer to these as the 6 demons or the 6 demon kings. Each of these 6 demons was considered a disaster in itself. And sealed in the hidden vault of the Corpse Blood Valley at the Heaven and Earth Society was one of these 6 demons, the Assassin King of the Sea, the Restraining Badger. At the same time, a cliff so steep that looking down made one feel as if gazing into an endless abyss. Not far from the cliff, outside a wall, countless corpses of Imi overflowed, and among them stood a muscular young man, covered in green and black blood, struggling to stay on his feet. Ha! Ha! The young man was Yu Mujin, a member of the Yu clan guarding this place. The Imi who had momentarily paused out of fear at the sight of him catching his breath in exhaustion, were now slowly approaching again. There are so many. Together with his father Yu Mujik they had killed nearly 1,000, no several thousand of them. Despite killing so many, an uncountable number of Imi were still endlessly pouring in, to the point where even he who rarely tired was struggling. Just then a tremendous roar came from behind. Pong, pong. With each roar the earth shook as if an earthquake had struck. Yu Mujin's face grew worried as he glanced back. His father, who had been holding back the Imi rushing towards the entrance of the formation, had hurriedly headed towards the source of that being's roar coming from behind. It's too fast. It hadn't been long since his father had subdued that being, yet it had awakened again. The frequency was now becoming worrisome. Normally it wouldn't be a concern, but his father was also quite exhausted from fighting this enormous number of Imi alongside him. Pong, Kwa. Just then, along with the thunderous sound, the roar of that being reached all the way here. At this, the Imi who had been stationary suddenly let out roars as if inspired by that being's tremendous cry, and charged forward like soldiers with raised morale. Kwa. Hiki. Kabakitaka. Faced with the oncoming Imi whose spirits had been revived, Yu Mujin turned the dial on the force-suppressing bracelet on his right arm. Kiriririk. As he turned it completely, white steam emerged from Yu Mujin's entire body, which began to turn black. Though exhausted, if he couldn't stop these creatures, the place his clan had been guarding would be exposed. Yumujin clenched his fist about to swing it. But then, kook. Had he pushed himself too hard? A terrible pain surged through his heart which hadn't fully healed, causing Yumujin to clutch his chest and stagger. Not missing this moment, the higher-ranked diabolic beasts and demonic beasts among the Imi-Manjiang simultaneously attacked Yumujin. Hey. Damn it! Yumujin swung his fist towards them, barely enduring the pain in his heart. As Yumujin swung his fist, and tremendous wind pressure arose, enveloping the charging wicked beasts and demonic beasts simultaneously. Quack-quack-quang. Just when it seemed he had repelled them, one demonic beast burst through the dust and debris, grabbed Yumujin and frantically charged towards the mountain wall. Kuuk. Yumujin, smashed into the mountain wall, continued to be pushed back even as he collided with it. Meanwhile, a black silhouette darted towards the entrance of the formation that had been left open as Yumujin was pushed back. Hugh. Yumujik, drenched in sweat, held a pointed wooden pillar inscribed with red sutras as he caught his breath, looking down at the abyss-like cliff below. This is bad. Whether due to lack of strength, the blue light visible at the bottom of the cliff wasn't weakening but growing stronger. At this rate, the worst-case scenario might really unfold. Hugh. As he took a deep breath, Yumujik's body began to glow black, and steam-like substance started to rise from his entire body. Having gathered his strength, Yumujik threw the wooden pillar inscribed with red sutras towards the bottom of the cliff. Pang! The wooden pillar pierced through layers of air. Strong ripples formed wherever it passed. But before it could become a mere speck, the blue light flickered strongly, a roar echoed out, and in response, a gale-like wind pressure surged up from the cliff along with shockwaves. With this, the wooden pillar disintegrated before it could even reach its target. Pass. Oh no! Yumujik's expression hardened. At this rate, the seal on this being might really break. Just then, it seems that even the Yu clan, being human after all, can't stand against sheer numbers. There's no winning against quantity, it seems. Flinch. Yumujik quickly turned his head at the voice from behind. About 10 paces in front of him stood a figure wearing a bamboo hat, hands behind their back. Even though he was exhausted from depleting his physical strength, how could someone approach this close without him noticing? This was surprising, but suddenly his son Yumujin flashed through his mind. Wujin. Could it be that the boy had fallen? Thung. As he stood there in shock, the bamboo-hatted figure drew the sword at their waist and approached with a sneer. You've worked hard all this time, so shall we now release the Great Strength King? Chapter 460 Approaching Omens 2. Great Yen Temple, one of the esoteric Buddhism, Dongfu's True Words, 3. In Dongfu, northern Shaanxi province. Behind the temple stood a large, towering peak, surrounded by over 100 Vajra warriors of the esoteric Buddhism chanting sutras while holding Vajras. The solemn chanting echoed throughout the mountainside, bringing peace to the minds and bodies of those who heard it. However, the Vajra warriors chanting looked unwell. Their complexions were poor, with dark circles under their eyes, all looking extremely fatigued as if they hadn't slept for a long time. Om Samani Samani Hum Harihana Hum Harihana Banaya Hum Anaya Hak Bom Bara Hum Batak. Nevertheless, they chanted the sutra without rest. In the midst of this, one Vajra warrior broke out in a cold sweat and then, pooh! Black blood spurted from his mouth like a fountain. The blood gushed out in such quantities that it seemed he might die from excessive bleeding just from what came out of his mouth. Alarmed, the nearby Vajra warriors were about to stop chanting when, Cal! An old monk standing behind them holding a rosary let out a shout. The Vajra warriors hesitated for a moment, then sat back down and resumed chanting the sutra. Om Samani Samani Hum Harihana Hum Harihana Banaya Hum Anaya Hak Bom Bara Hum Batak. Meanwhile, the old monk hurriedly ran to the monk who was spewing blood. Kek kek kek. The condition of the Vajra warrior who kept vomiting blood was truly at its worst. As if all the fluids in his body were draining out, he was rapidly becoming emaciated, and black blood vessels were rising to the surface of his exposed skin, making him look hideous. The old monk sat behind the Vajra warrior, placed a Vajra against him and summoned the power of the Buddha's way. Ku-u. The Vajra warrior convulsed as if in agony. Despite this, the old monk didn't stop and continued to push in the power of the Buddha's way. At that moment, A black, ominous haze rose from the mouth of the Vajra warrior who had been spewing blood. Then, diduduk. The Vajra warrior grabbed his own neck and twisted it backwards. Kung. The old monk's expression darkened at the sight of the Vajra warrior falling with his neck broken. Even the power of the Buddha's way, accumulated over many years, couldn't overcome the evil energy that had penetrated the Vajra warrior. But this wasn't the end. Kek. Once again another Vajra warrior lifted his head and spewed black blood from his mouth. The old monk was about to get up and run to the Vajra warrior when... All around, Vajra warriors lifted their heads and spewed black blood. The old monk's expression hardened at the sight of them. The bodies of the convulsing Vajra warriors were wasting away at an alarming rate. When just one Vajra warrior had been spewing blood, everyone had endured at the old monk's shout, but now with over 10 of them spewing blood. Heek. Run away. We're all going to die. Some of the Vajra warriors who had gone into convulsions cried out, pale-faced, and frantically tried to escape. Stop. Even the old monk's shout couldn't stop them. The grotesque deaths of the Vajra warriors had caused a rift, and nearly half of them, unable to contain their fear, threw away their Vajras and fled. This can't be. If we stop here, everything will have been for nothing. The old monk shouted, infusing his voice with true chi, then walked in front of the Vajra warriors surrounding the peak, clasped his hands together, and loudly chanted the demon-subduing true words. Om Samani Samani Hum Harihana Hum Harihana Banaya Hum Anaya Hakbam Bara Hum Batak. As the old monk chanted, a golden light of Buddhist power flowed from his body. The profound Buddhist energy seemed to calm the other Vajra warriors who had been trying to flee in fear. They sat back down in their places and followed the old monk in chanting the demon-subduing true words. It seemed as though the chanting was stabilizing again. Just then, Kek. The old monk who had been chanting grabbed his own throat. Then, as if in agony, he fell to his knees and began to convulse violently, his face turning red. Master! 2 Vajra warriors from the front row rushed to support him. However, the old monk, writhing in pain, pushed them away. As the Vajra warriors tried to grab him again. Queek. The old monk vomited, but it wasn't black blood. It was strangely shaped worms. What on earth? The Vajra warriors, shocked at the sight of the bizarre worms, stepped back at a loss for what to do. What kind of ominous sign was this? Was this evil so potent that even an old monk who had accumulated decades of Buddhist practice couldn't withstand it? As soon as the Vajra warriors' chanting stopped. Kek. Once again, Vajra warriors all around began lifting their heads and spewing black blood like fountains. The fear and terror that had momentarily subsided gripped the crowd again in an instant. I don't want to die. Uaea. Screaming Vajra warriors tried to flee from all directions. However, unlike those who had escaped earlier, the Vajra warriors who stood up from their seats couldn't lift their feet from the ground, as if their legs were held in place. What is this? I can't lift my feet. Heek. As they struggled to lift their feet, something even more terrifying happened. Kwaduk. Those trying to lift their feet had their legs torn off. Kaya. And my legs. The Vajra warriors whose legs had been torn off fell to the ground, screaming in agony. But then their bodies began to stick to the ground as if being absorbed. And my body. As they were absorbed, their skin tore and they began to be sucked into the ground. The sight was truly horrific. Skin and muscles twisted, bones broke. It was almost unbearable to watch. The Vajra warriors near the old monk who had vomited the bizarre worms dropped their Vajras and trembled in fear at this horrific scene. Simul. Before their eyes, they saw the enormous amount of blood shed by the Vajra warriors moving on its own, flowing up towards the peak. The large quantity of blood that had flowed up was absorbed into the peak. The peak began to shake violently as if hit by an earthquake, and cracks started to form. The eyes of the old monk, who had been suffering while vomiting worms, widened as if they would tear. This was because his eyes met the chilling gaze visible through the widening cracks. Kug. Pong. With that, the old monk's body suddenly swelled up and then burst. And he wasn't the only one. The same happened to the 2 Vajra warriors trembling in fear nearby. Their bodies also swelled up and then burst. The blood that flowed from their bodies also mixed with the flowing blood and was absorbed into the peak. Jiabik Jiabik. Amidst this tragic scene, a figure walked through the blood. This figure wearing a bamboo hat was forming a hand seal with one hand, and in the other held a gruesome ritual tool made of interwoven skulls. The bamboo-hatted figure, appearing with this ritual tool, spoke while looking at the enormous being inside the crumbling peak. The time has come to spread those white wings again. White Phoenix Demon King. 5. In a cave beneath a deep cliff in Panan, Zhejiang Province. Entering the cave, one would find a large cavern studded with countless luminous pearls, like stars in the night sky. And beneath this cavern numerous formations were densely engraved. In the center of the formations there existed something enormous. This massive being, occupying nearly half of the huge cavern that was almost 100 jang in size, had a golden mane, a tiger-like head, and a tail that seemed to be woven from hundreds of blades. Kururu. Its appearance was exactly like that of a lion. Horrifyingly, the entire body of this enormous lion was pierced by hundreds of hooks, and the chains connecting these hooks were densely embedded in the cavern walls. Upon closer inspection, one could see that red letters appearing to be spells were engraved on the chains as well. These were Kururu. If the giant lion tried to move even a little, the hooks and chains engraved with red letters would simultaneously pull, threatening to tear apart the lion's limbs, no, its entire body. The pain was so intense that this enormous lion couldn't move an inch. One peculiar thing about this lion was that it had no eyes. Rather than being naturally eyeless, it seemed they had been forcibly removed, leaving sunken holes. Kung kung. At some point this giant lion began to sniff and flare its nostrils, then tried to raise its crouched body, enduring even the hooks constricting it with intense hostility. As the lion tried to raise its body, the entire cavern began to shake and tremble. It felt as if it might collapse at any moment, but as soon as the formations densely engraved on the floor activated, the vibrations were absorbed and disappeared. At this moment someone wearing a bamboo hat walked towards the lion, hands behind their back. The lion's face twitched and then, it let out a tremendous roar that seemed like it could burst eardrums. The roar caused a storm-like gale to sweep through the cavern, but the bamboo-hatted figure, seemingly unconcerned, approached right up to the lion's nose. Then stopping in front of it, the bamboo-hatted figure spoke. Will you follow me if I give you new eyes? Or will you follow me if I give you another chance for revenge? Lion Grasping King. 6. The Imperial Palace in Kaifeng, Hunan Province. In one of the most splendid quarters of a noble consort in the inner palace. The delicate white hand holding a teacup cracked and shattered. Your Highness. As the shattered teacup pieces fell, the pretty court lady beside her exclaimed in surprise and hurriedly helped the noble consort shake off the remaining pieces in her hand. Then looking outside she called out loudly. Is anyone there? Quickly. However, the court lady had to stop at a raised hand gesture. The court lady spoke in a troubled voice. Noble consort, we must call for a physician immediately. Your hand must have been cut by the sharp. Her eyes widened. This was because the noble consort's hand, which she had assumed would surely be cut, was perfectly fine. Even she had been slightly cut while brushing off the pieces from the consort's hand just moments ago. What could this mean? As she wondered, she saw the corners of the noble consort's mouth turn up. The court lady couldn't help but let out a gasp at the sight of the smile from noble consort Ho, the most beautiful woman in the imperial palace, worthy of being called a beauty that could topple a nation. Ah! Regardless, noble consort Ho stood up. Diolkyung. She then approached the shaking window and opened it. The night sky without a single cloud was perfectly clear, but the cold wind blowing strongly like a whirlwind was strangely ominous. As she stretched out her hand to feel this wind with her fingertips, noble consort Ho muttered. The stench of blood will soon fill the world.